little one. Join us!
Have you ever experienced an indescribable sense of pressure while walking alone down a dark path at night, as if something massive and invisible were suddenly looming over you from the sky? It might simply be a trick of the mind, or perhaps a fleeting illusion brought on by the profound silence of the night. However, it is also possible that it is the work of a monstrosity that has been feared and passed down since ancient times, from the dusty archives of the Edo period to the eerie urban legends of the modern era. There exists a strange entity known as the Nobusuma, whose presence is whispered about with persistent and vivid detail. At first glance, its form is said to resemble a giant flying squirrel, or a bat tearing through the veil of night. But its nature is far too alien, and its cruelty is enough to freeze one's spine. What do we truly know about the identity of this monster, which is said to glide through the darkness, covering the faces of its human targets, so perfectly that there is no escape, and snatching away their lives without a sound? Even in the modern Reiwa era, where the light of science seems to have reached every corner and driven out mystery, eyewitness accounts of unexplainable flying creatures continue to emerge from all over the country. From the days when people feared darkness itself to the modern city streets illuminated by LEDs, they have certainly continued to exist. This time we will delve deep into the full picture of the Nobusuma, which was nearly buried in the depths of history, as well as the latest eyewitness information and the unimaginable, shocking facts hidden behind them. After listening to this story to the end, you will find yourself unconsciously looking up at the sky and worrying about the shadows behind you as you walk at night. Now, let us open the forbidden door that should never have been stepped through. During the Edo period, a time when night was much deeper than it is today, and people spent their anxious hours relying only on the faint light of lanterns, the existence of the Nobusuma was recognized not as a mere fairy tale, but as a realistic threat directly linked to death. In old books such as the Wakan-sansai Zue, an encyclopedia compiled by Terajima Ryoan, it is described in detail as a giant flying squirrel that has accumulated magical power over many years and transformed into a terrifying yokai. However, to dismiss this as a mere misidentification of a wild animal, or a delusion born of an ignorant era, would be to ignore the descriptions left behind, which are far too specific and raw. According to records from that time, when the Nobusuma glided through the night sky, it was said that sparks were violently scattered from its body. The sight of what looked like a living fireball trailing through the pitch-black sky, both horrific and fantastical, plunged the villages of that time into the depths of terror. This suggests that it possessed a supernatural energy that cannot be explained at all by the term bioluminescence. Furthermore, its range of activity was not limited to mountainous areas, where trees grew thick and lush. It was said that its figure was frequently witnessed, even on the outskirts of the town of Ado, in back alleys, where human traffic had ceased, and under the eaves of deserted temples. The hunting method of the Nobusuma is extremely cold-blooded. For a human it has marked as prey, it approaches from behind like a grim reaper, without making any sound of flapping wings. Then it spreads its massive leather-textured wings, large enough to easily wrap around a human head, and completely seals the victim's face. Deprived of sight, and with their breathing blocked, the victims struggle in intense fear in the darkness, eventually losing their strength and dying. It is recorded that the bodies of the victims discovered later had faces that had turned an unnatural shade of purple, with countless scratches from sharp talons carved into them as if to engrave a deep-seated grudge. Have you ever heard an unnatural sound of the wind in a late-night forest or park, even though there was no breeze? Perhaps it was the moment and hungry? Nobusuma flapped its wings behind you in search of prey. Further investigation reveals the true nature of the fear felt by people of that time. In the psychological structure of the Edo period, threats coming from the sky were akin to unavoidable divine punishment. While beasts walking on the ground could be kept out by fences or gates, such defenses were meaningless against the Nobusuma dancing in the sky. This sense of despair made the legend of the Nobusuma even more robust. Furthermore, experts point out the possibility that the description of the Nobusuma, scattering sparks, was not just a visual effect, but that it possessed a unique constitution that reacted with static electricity caused by friction, or perhaps unknown components in the atmosphere. The most inexplicable point in the ecology of the Nobusuma, and one that deviates from biological common sense, is its abnormal obsession. According to legend, once a Nobusuma remembers the scent of prey, it never forgets it, and is said to pursue it relentlessly, even if it is many miles away. In particular, it chooses the cunning method of extinguishing the lantern light, held by a person walking alone at night, with a gust-like flap of its wings creating complete darkness before attacking. This planned behavior makes one feel not just a mere predatory instinct, but a high level of intelligence or even something close to malice. One folkloric theory suggests that the Nobusuma prefers to inhale human breath, and the act of covering the face is considered not only to suffocate the victim, but also to efficiently ingest the final energy leaking from the lungs. This may be an act closer to stealing a part of the soul, rather than mere nutritional intake. There are also scattered records that the hair of the Nobusuma is extremely stiff and sharp like needles or razors. From a modern biological perspective, it is impossible for common giant flying squirrels, or flying squirrels, to undergo such aggressive evolution, that their fur can cut through skin even over clothing. However, some experts seriously suggest the possibility that they are an unknown, mutant species left behind from the lineage of evolution. In the depths of remote mountains and valleys, or perhaps an undiscovered large-sized chiroptera that is, a giant bat. Where on earth do they come from and where do they hide while the sunlight shines? Are they hanging upside down from the beams of old storehouses or the ceilings of unexplored limestone caves, quietly waiting for the night to visit again? If you are walking at night and suddenly experience an unexplained malfunction, where the light of your smartphone goes out, or if the street lights completely fall silent after starting to flicker, it is not a failure of the electrical system. Please run away from that spot immediately and take refuge in a place with a roof. It is the signal that the Nobusuma's hunt is about to begin. Let us analyze the behavior of the Nobusuma. From the perspective of behavioral economics, the Nobusuma takes an extremely rational risk avoidance action, selectively targeting isolated subjects who can be caught with certainty, rather than engaging in uncertain hunting. For them, the act of extinguishing the lantern light is a sophisticated strategy to deprive the opponent of their ability to counterattack and maximize their own success rate. Can a creature capable of such high-level judgment really be called just a wild animal? The legends of the Nobusuma pass down in the Shikoku region, such as Kochi and Tokushima prefectures, where steep mountains stretch out, carry an even more specific and unavoidable terror. In these regions, the Nobusuma is sometimes called by the alias Masari, and the characteristic of clinging to the victim's face is passed down. Along with the fear, what is interesting is that practical methods for repelling the Nobusuma were established in the villages of that time. According to legend, if one felt an ominous presence and was about to be attacked by a Nobusuma, it was said to be effective to hold sharp blades, such as sickles or machetes, above one's head to threaten the sky. Alternatively, it was said that the approach could be blocked by chanting, a spell consisting of specific syllables. This eloquently tells us that for the people of that time, the Nobusuma was not a mere product of the imagination or a tool for putting children to sleep, but a real threat that could result in death if appropriate measures were not taken. Furthermore, there is a terrifying theory regarding the growth of the Nobusuma. It is said that if a Nobusuma survives for many hundreds of years and gains further magical power, it evolves into an even more powerful and massive yokai called the Nodepo. The Nodepo is said to have even more massive wings than the Nobusuma, and possesses such overwhelming power and mass that it no longer just covers the face, but can swallow a human whole. Among hunters who live in the mountains and know the true face of the night mountains, even now, when walking through the night mountains that have become unnaturally silent to the point of pain, there are those who sense the cold-blooded presence of the Nobusuma, looking down from the gaps in the trees and unconsciously release the safety of their rifles. These hunters believe more in the wrath of the mountain or the presence of the abnormal felt with their skin than in scientific evidence. According to the story of one old hunter, when a Nobusuma is nearby, the night air feels strangely lukewarm, and a foul odor like burnt animal fat wafts through. The moment that smell hits your nose, you must not look up. If you look up, what spreads there is not the starry sky, but the belly of the Nobusuma trying to swallow you. Is there an old legend in your area about monsters that fly in the sky or terrifying entities lurking in the night sky? It might be the Nobusuma in a different form. Eyewitness accounts of the Nobusuma in modern times continue to live on in the distortions of modern society, having changed their form. A few years ago, a group of college students driving late at night in a mountainous area without streetlights reported a bizarre experience. While driving, they said a massive black something, large enough to cover the entire windshield of the car, slammed into them from above as if it were being thrown. Even though the driver moved the wipers at maximum speed in a panic, the object stuck to the glass like a suction cup, and along with a violent sound of flapping wings, an unbearable animal odor filled the car. Eventually, the object melted into the darkness of the night as if nothing had happened. But when they stopped the car in a safe place to check, they found countless fine scratches and a sticky, mysterious liquid clinging to the tempered glass. The local police investigation concluded it was a collision with a large bird of prey, but the old man from the area who was present reportedly warned with a pale face, "That's the work of a Nobusuma. Never pass through that road again." In this way, even with modern high technology, phenomena that cannot be explained within the framework of science exist in abundance right next to us. There are unidentified shadows captured in the noise-filled footage of dashcams and flying objects, performing high-speed movements as if ignoring the laws of physics captured by high-sensitivity surveillance cameras. Among these, there is a very high possibility that the entities people once feared as Nobusuma are included, adapted to their modern surroundings. Furthermore, eyewitness accounts in urban areas cannot be ignored. There are testimonies of something gliding like a paraglider from the rooftops of skyscrapers, brushing over the heads of people walking in parks late at night. The witness said, "It was too big for a bat, and the sound of the wings was too realistic for a plane." Isn't this evidence that the Nobusuma is no longer an entity only of mountainous areas, but is also developing the concrete jungle as its own hunting ground? Around you, have you ever heard a story about seeing an unexplained shadow or felt a gaze as if someone were looking down on you on a night road? What is considered to have a deep connection with the Nobusuma are the legends of fireballs and mysterious fires scattered throughout various parts of Japan. The classical characteristic of the Nobusuma scattering sparks while gliding suggests, from a modern scientific perspective, the possibility of plasma, which is an ionization phenomenon in the atmosphere, or perhaps an unknown bioluminescent organism with light organs incomparably more powerful than those of a firefly. Certainly, interpretations such as bioluminescence caused by static electricity or for visually luring prey seem reasonable at first glance. However, there are many eyewitness accounts of light movements that seem to have a will of their own, which cannot be explained by that alone. One radical unidentified creature researcher speculates that the true identity of the Nobusuma is a descendant of pterosaurs that secretly survived from the Cretaceous period, or a type of giant bat, and that it accumulates a large amount of scales containing special components on the surface of its wings. This is a physical theory that these scales rapidly oxidize and ignite due to friction with the air during high-speed gliding, appearing to those on the ground like an eerie fireball dancing in the night sky. However, even with this theory, it is impossible to fully explain the abnormal obsession with the prey, such as the fixation on human breath and the relentless targeting of the face. The Nobusuma may be an inseparable combination of a physical biological aspect and a spiritual aspect in which resentment and fear are embodied. From a metaphysical approach or a Jungian psychological perspective, the idea that the Nobusuma is a materialization of the primal fear of darkness, sleeping in people's subconscious under certain conditions, is also plausible. In other words, as long as people fear the Nobusuma and continue to believe in its existence, it will be born again and again from the darkness. Do you think that a yokai is an undiscovered creature with an anatomically possible body, or a phenomenon created by strong human thoughts distorting space? The answer is known only to the shadow still dancing above your head. Even more surprisingly, legends similar to the Nobusuma are widely distributed beyond the boundaries of Japan, even overseas. For example, a monster called the Manananggal, passed down in the Philippines and other parts of Southeast Asia, shares very interesting commonalities. The Manananggal is said to detach its own upper body at night, fly around with massive bat-like wings, and suck the breath of sleeping humans or devour their internal organs. The act of the Nobusuma covering a face to suck in breath, and the ecology of the Manananggal. In these, an eerie coincidence can be found, ignoring geographical distances. Perhaps in ancient times, there existed a common top predator that ruled the night skies of the entire Asian region. It is said to have gone extinct from the main stage due to large-scale climate change or the advancement of humanity. But perhaps a few individuals are surviving unnoticed in modern frontiers or the blind spots of cities. Due to the dramatic improvement in gene analysis technology in recent years, examples of new species of large mammals being discovered in the deep sea or dense forests that have DNA extremely close to species previously considered imaginary creatures are too numerous to mention. The day when the true identity of the Nobusuma is completely illuminated by the sharp light of modern science, and its taxonomic position is determined may not be that far off. However, just because its identity is revealed does not mean the instinctive fear associated with its existence will disappear. Rather, when the fact that a monster previously thought to be a fantasy actually has muscles and bones and is flying in the sky, even at this very moment is proven, humanity may experience panic in its true sense. Imagine it, the day when the headline "Nobusuma existence confirmed" dances on the cover of a science magazine and its anatomical diagrams are released. It might mean the end of the safe world we have built. Among the records concerning the Nobusuma, one of the most inexplicable incidents that deepens the biological mystery is the massacre of livestock chickens in one night that occurred in an isolated village during the Meiji period. Although the chickens in that village were kept in sturdy chicken coops, all of them became silent corpses within a single night. What was shocking was the cause of death. All the chickens had their neck bones accurately broken and their heads severely damaged. But there was almost no sign of their meat or internal organs being eaten. It was as if the slaughter were carried out not for eating, but solely for the purpose of taking life itself. Around the chicken coop, eerie marks were left in the damp soil, as if something had landed with its massive wings spread, and the wingspan was estimated to have easily exceeded 3 meters. The local official of the time who investigated this gruesome incident concluded that it was a crime committed by an unknown bird of prey that had flown from above, or perhaps a type of Nobusuma heard of in legend, and urged the villagers to be strictly on their guard. That cruelty, which ignores the basic biological principle of predation and makes one feel a pure malice or even some kind of ritualistic intent, resonates with the hostility toward humans consistently found in the legends of the Nobusuma. If the Nobusuma is still flying soundlessly above our heads, in the shadows of skyscrapers or between the clouds, what on earth are they seeking as they look down upon this noisy ground? It seems to me that they are seeking not just to satisfy a mere hunger, but something deeper and darker. The hypothesis even emerges that they are harvesting the primitive emotion of fear that humans have lost in the process of building civilization. What do you think about the abnormal behavior of animals in nature, taking other lives ruthlessly without any reason for food? As the final stage of the story, we must touch upon the unavoidable reality we are facing right now. Due to rapid climate change and unplanned environmental development in recent years, sanctuaries protected by deep mountains have been destroyed, and unknown creatures that made them their homes are being forced to expand their spheres of activity to human settlements and even large cities. Along with this, eyewitness information of the Nobusuma is being reported with a frequency and specificity never seen before. Blurred and unclear videos and photos flowing through SNS timelines. Among them are recorded strange shadows showing alien movements that are clearly not existing birds, drones, or even aircraft. They rest their wings in the shadows of utility poles in residential areas, or stand on the edges of the rooftops of skyscrapers late at night, observing the ground with cold gazes as if looking for defenseless prey. The terror that the people of Edo once held, enough to prevent them from sleeping soundly, is by no means a weathered relic of the past. Rather, because true darkness has been lost and we are complacent in artificial light, the existence of the Nobusuma, lurking in the slight shadows of buildings and the blind spots of streetlights, becomes a sharper and more inescapable fear that pierces our throats. Next time you stop by a convenience store on your way home from work late at night, and happen to pass through an unnaturally dark place where the light of the streetlights does not reach, I have a request. Please pay attention not only to your feet as you stare at your smartphone screen, but also to the bottomless darkness of the sky spreading directly above you. There, as it waits impatiently for you to notice, the Nobusuma, which has certainly spread its massive wings without a sound, may have already begun its quiet descent to suck away your final breath. How was it? The true identity of the Nobusuma, which has been engraved in the deep psyche of the Japanese people, and passed down since ancient times, and the chain of terror that continues unabated into the modern age. To laugh this off as a mere misidentification of a giant flying squirrel or a superstition of an old era is impossible given the numerous and specific testimonies that have accumulated across the ages. No matter how much science advances, and no matter how much we overconfidently believe we are the lords of all creation, it is utterly impossible to solve all the mysteries of this vast world and place them under our control. Rather, there may be truths that are happier for the human spirit if left unrevealed, remaining in the darkness as existences beyond our understanding. The Nobusuma will surely be dancing through some night sky tonight, as well, along with eerie sparks when we have fallen asleep, circling in search of its next prey. Until those wings cover your face, you cannot notice its presence. If you found this story interesting or felt a spine-chilling experience, please subscribe to the channel and give us a high rating. Also, if there are stories of unidentified creatures similar to the Nobusuma passed down in the area where you live, or if you yourself have had an unexplainable mysterious experience on a night road, please write the details in the comment section. Your precious experiences may be the only key to unraveling the next mystery hidden in the darkness. Now please check the locks on your windows even more carefully than usual tonight, block out the gaze from the sky, and please have a quiet night. I will see you in the next video.
You are lost, little one. Join us. Hehehe.
In the dead of night, within a room, so profoundly silent that the passage of time feels like a physical weight pressing against your skin, a sudden, sharp sound, a crystalline snap, like dry kindling breaking cleaves through the stillness. Or perhaps it is a heavy, rhythmic groan, the unmistakable sensation of floorboards depressing under a weight that shouldn't be there, as if an invisible intruder is testing the structural integrity of your sanctuary. In those moments, when you are tucked away in the supposed safety of your bed, you might hear a scratching or a scurrying sound, emanating from the darkness of the adjacent room, a noise that mimics the movement of something lithe and low to the ground. You have likely experienced this phenomenon, haven't you? That sudden jolt of adrenaline when the inanimate world around you decides to speak? In our modern, sterilized world, we are quick to dismiss these occurrences as the mere settling of a building, the thermal contraction of wood as the night air cools, or perhaps the mundane friction of joints adjusting to a change in humidity. Science provides us with a comforting, albeit dry vocabulary to neutralize our primal fears, turning a terrifying encounter with the unknown into a predictable equation of physics. However, long before the light of modern architecture sought to banish every shadow, the people of ancient Japan understood that these sounds were far from accidental or mechanical. They knew that the crack and the moan of a house were the deliberate expressions of a specific entity, a being with a name and a purpose that defied simple material explanation. This entity is known as the Nariya, the house ringer, a spirit or yokai that dwells within the very fabric of our dwellings, manifesting as the literal vibration of the home itself. Today, we shall embark on a journey into the deep abyss of this folklore, exploring how the Nariya continues to interact with our modern lives, and why its presence might be a harbinger of something far more significant than a mere structural quirk. Have you ever been alone at night and heard a sound that felt entirely out of place, perhaps coming from a corner of the room that should have been empty? If so, I invite you to describe that sound in the comments. Was it a sharp tap, a long drawn-out creak, or something altogether more unsettling? Your experiences are the threads that weave the tapestry of this ongoing mystery. To truly understand the Nariya, one must first be able to visualize it, though its physical form is rarely seen by human eyes. In the masterful pages of Toriyama Sekien's Konjaku Gazuzoku Hyaki, a seminal 18th-century compendium of the supernatural, the Nariya is depicted with a hauntingly specific clarity. It is shown as a small childlike figure, or perhaps a diminutive oni, with a face that reflects a mischievous yet ancient intelligence. These creatures rarely act in isolation instead. They are often portrayed in small groups, a phantom workforce scurrying through the hidden veins of a house. They occupy the crawl spaces, the lightless voids behind the walls, and the dusty rafters of the attic, moving with a synchronized grace that suggests a collective consciousness. In their tiny clawed hands, they carry small mallets, tools that look suspiciously like the implements used by traditional carpenters. By striking the pillars and beams of the house, or by violently vibrating their own bodies in a state of spiritual frenzy, they create a resonance that ripples through the entire structure. According to Edo period accounts, the arrival of the Nariya is often preceded by a subtle, almost imperceptible trembling of the air, a sensation that makes the hair on one's arms stand up before any sound is actually heard. What makes this experience truly terrifying is the elusive nature of the sound itself. You might hear a sharp rap from the ceiling, but as soon as you turn your gaze upward, a corresponding thud echoes from beneath your feet, followed by a series of frantic taps from the wall directly behind your head. The house ceases to be a stationary object, and instead begins to behave like a colossal living organism, one that is groaning in a language of wood and stone that we have long since forgotten how to translate. This creates a profound psychological disorientation, where the victim feels as though the very walls meant to protect them are instead closing in, or worse, conspiring against them. Is the Nariya merely a prankster of the spirit world? A supernatural nuisance that finds amusement in the startled gasps of humans? From a folkloric and anthropological perspective, the role of the Nariya is infinitely more nuanced and burdened with symbolic weight. In ancient Japanese thought, a house was never regarded as a mere inanimate shelter. It was viewed as a sacred space, a microcosm of the universe, and often a living entity in its own right. The Nariya acts as a bridge, a manifestation of the house's internal energy, or ki, taking on a physical form to communicate shifts in that energy. There is a persistent theory that the Nariya becomes particularly active when the spirit of the house is undergoing a traumatic or significant transition. For instance, when a family is on the verge of a great misfortune, or when the ownership of a property is about to change hands. The Nariya is said to shake the building with a desperate intensity, as if the house itself is mourning or warning its inhabitants of an impending rupture in their lives. In older traditions, the sound of the Nariya was often interpreted as a sign that the Takushin, or the protective deity of the house, was displeased or, more alarmingly, preparing to abandon the premises entirely. When a house loses its guardian spirit, it becomes vulnerable to all manner of external spiritual decay, and the Nariya's frantic drumming is the alarm bell signaling this loss of divine protection. Therefore, if you find that your own home has recently begun to ring with inexplicable noises, it might be worth considering that the structure is trying to tell you something about the state of your own life, or the energy you are bringing into the space. As we delve deeper, we must ask, can the Nariya be dismissed as a relic of a superstitious past? Surprisingly, this yokai has a connection to reality that is both tangible and terrifying, specifically in its historical association with seismic activity. Throughout various regions of Japan, there are ancient records suggesting that years, in which the Nariya is particularly clamorous, are often the harbingers of devastating earthquakes. When we examine the detailed journals kept during the great earthquakes of the Edo period, we find a recurring theme in the days and weeks leading up to the main tremors. Residents reported an unprecedented frequency of violent house ringings and mysterious vibrations that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth. From a modern scientific standpoint, we might theorize that these sensitive spirits, or the phenomenon we call the Nariya, were reacting to pre-shocks or low-frequency infrasound generated by the movement of tectonic plates. These subtle shifts in the Earth's crust, which are often imperceptible to the human ear, would cause the wooden frames of traditional houses to groan and vibrate. Our ancestors, lacking seismographs, personified this terrifying subterranean energy as the Nariya, interpreting the sounds as a warning from the Earth itself. It is much like how modern science acknowledges that animals often behave erratically before a disaster. The Nariya may well be the cultural vessel through which humans processed their intuition of a coming catastrophe. They were not the cause of the disaster, but the messengers, turning the ominous silence of the earth into an audible siren that pleaded for the inhabitants to pay attention. Has anyone among you ever heard a strange, persistent sound in the walls shortly before a significant earthquake or natural disaster? The way the atmosphere changes in those moments is often described as a heavy stillness, punctuated by these sharp cracks. Sharing these specific details can help us understand if the Nariya is still actively sounding the alarm in our modern age. Another compelling hypothesis regarding the origin of the Nariya involves the concept of land memory or residual hauntings. This theory suggests that a house is not just built upon soil, but upon a foundation of history, emotion, and sometimes profound tragedy. Any site that has witnessed intense human suffering, violent events, or even just the long-term accumulation of powerful obsessions can retain a vibrational imprint of those experiences. The Nariya, in this context, is the mechanism by which the land's hidden trauma is translated into the physical world. It is noted that Nariya sightings and intense house ringings are disproportionately common in areas with unstable ground, such as reclaimed wetlands or sites of former landslides. The physical instability of the soil creates a spiritual instability, a friction between the physical structure and the metaphysical memory of the land. This leads to the chilling phenomenon where a brand new house, built with the finest materials and modern engineering, begins to suffer from violent creaking and tapping the very first night the owners move in. In such cases, the Nariya is not merely a resident spirit, but the voice of the land itself expressing a rejection of the new inhabitants, or indicating that the previous tenants, whether they be the spirits of the dead or the memory of the soil, have not yet vacated the premises. The sound is a territorial claim, a jarring reminder that we are merely temporary guests on a surface that remembers everything. Throughout history, various methods have been employed to appease or silence the Nariya. The most common rituals involve the use of Mauricio, or mounds of purifying salt, placed at the corners of the room, or the scattering of sanctified sand provided by local shrines. Others would resort to placing protective talismans or ofuda on the main pillars of the house to create a spiritual barrier. However, the Nariya is unique among yokai because it is not always viewed as a purely malevolent force. In many rural traditions, it is believed that the Nariya and the human inhabitants exist in a state of delicate symbiosis. The house is a shared space, and to forcibly exorcise the spirit might be to damage the very soul of the dwelling. There are local legends suggesting that if one responds to the Nariya's noise with words of gratitude or a simple, polite acknowledgement, like "thank you for your hard work," the sounds will gradually soften. Over time, the jarring cracks transform into a gentle, protective hum, a sign that the energy has been harmonized. This reflects a profound aspect of Japanese culture, the idea of coexistence with the other. Rather than seeking to dominate or destroy that which we do not understand, there is a wisdom in acknowledging the presence of the invisible, treating the unknown with the same respect we would show a living neighbor. Perhaps the sound in your wall tonight isn't a threat, but an invitation to acknowledge the unseen forces that make your life possible. Even in our contemporary urban landscapes, dominated by steel, glass, and reinforced concrete, the Nariya has not vanished, it has merely evolved. In the sterile corridors of high-rise apartment complexes, Where the traditional wood has been replaced by cold stone and metal, the phenomenon persists in new and unsettling ways. Residents often report the sound of heavy footsteps in empty hallways at 300 a.m., or the unmistakable sound of a marble dropping on the floor of the apartment above, even when that unit is known to be vacant. This modern Nariya has adapted to the materials of the 21st century, finding its home in the hollows of ventilation shafts, the resonance of elevator cables, and the structural joints of massive towers. Some researchers of the paranormal even suggest that the Nariya has moved beyond the acoustic realm and into the digital. In an age where our homes are saturated with Wi-Fi signals, smart devices, and complex electrical grids, the vibration of the Nariya might manifest as inexplicable glitches in our technology: a television that turns itself on in the middle of the night, a smart speaker that begins to play static without a command, or the sudden distorted noise during a phone. Call these could be the modern mallets of the Nariya, striking the invisible pillars of our digital reality to remind us that, even in a world of data, the ancient spirits still demand to be heard. If at this very moment a sharp pop were to echo from the corner of your room, how would you react? Would you reach for a scientific explanation, or would you feel the weight of 1,000 years of folklore pressing against your window? Ultimately, the existence of the Nariya forces us to confront a humbling truth. The places we call home, the sanctuaries we believe we own, are actually shared environments. A house is a complex intersection of history, geology, and the supernatural. The sounds the Nariya makes are the seams of our reality, fraying, a reminder that the boundary between our world and the hidden world is as thin as a sheet of paper. When you lie down tonight and the world falls silent, I urge you to listen not with your ears, but with your intuition. Listen to the way the walls sigh, the way the floorboards murmur, and the way the air itself seems to pulse. The house is speaking to you in a language older than words. If you hear a tap, do not be afraid. It is simply your invisible neighbor, the house ringer, checking the foundations of your world. We have peered into the shadows of the Nariya, exploring its origins in the mallets of tiny spirits and its modern evolution in our digital homes. While science may give us one answer, the persistent and eerie nature of these encounters suggests that there is a mystery here that cannot be fully contained by equations. Whether the sound you hear tonight is a warning of a coming shift in your life, a memory of the land crying out, or a guardian spirit's way of saying hello, the Nariya remains a vital part of the unseen world. If you find yourself plagued by persistent house ringings, remember the ancient wisdom. Acknowledge the spirit, respect the space, and listen to what the silence is trying to tell you. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the world of the Nariya. If you have had your own strange encounters within the walls of your home, or if there is another yokai whose secrets you wish to uncover, please let me know in the comments below. If you found this exploration enlightening, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like to help us continue uncovering the mysteries of the unseen. I look forward to seeing you in our next encounter with the strange and the supernatural. Until then, listen closely to the night. Good night.
You are lost, little one. Join us. Hehehe.
The pitch-black darkness of a midnight silence governs the world, creating a heavy, oppressive void where the very air seems to have frozen, in anticipation of something unnatural. In that deathly stillness, a sound suddenly erupts, a voice, so grotesque and alien that it seems to tear through the fabric of reality itself. It bears a haunting resemblance to the cry of a bird, yet it carries the damp, guttural growl of a predatory beast. A resonance that feels entirely outside the boundaries of this earthly realm. This is the voice of the Nue, the unidentified monstrosity that once paralyzed the ancient capital of Heian with a terror so profound, it altered the course of history and stained the records of the imperial court with blood and madness. Its form is said to be a blasphemous union of disparate parts, a monkey's face, the torso of a tanuki, the powerful limbs of a tiger, and a serpent for a tail, a silhouette that stands as the ultimate symbol of a forbidden biological taboo. Why would such distinct, clashing, predatory traits be fused into a single breathing organism. To dismiss this as mere folklore or a product of ancient imagination becomes impossible when one encounters the chillingly precise eyewitness accounts preserved in the scrolls of old. We, in our modern age of glass and steel, might wish to laugh this off as a primitive legend. But can we truly afford such arrogance? What if this creature was not a myth, but a catastrophic failure of an ancient genetic experiment that predates our known history, or perhaps a biological entity that slipped through a temporal rift from a dimension where the laws of evolution followed a darker, more chaotic path? Tonight, we shall descend into the abyss of this whispered history to uncover the harrowing truth that the Nue presents to us even today. Have you ever felt the prickle of cold sweat on your neck, sensing the gaze of multiple non-human eyes, watching you from the shadows of a room you thought was empty? The descent of night in the ancient capital was not merely the absence of light, but the arrival of a physical thick shroud that transformed the familiar world into a hunting ground for the inexplicable. Without the protection of artificial illumination, the darkness was a living thing, an entity that swallowed sound and light alike. Within that ink-like void, a strange, sickening odor would often drift through the air, a scent like wet, rotting fur mixed with the sharp metallic tang of old blood and ozone. It was in this environment that the people of Haiyan began to hear that sound, a series of dissonant frequencies that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly within the bone marrow. It was a rhythmic pulsing, a wet scraping sound that triggered a circuit, breaking fear within the human amygdala, signaling that a predator was near, one that the eyes could not yet perceive. The descriptions of the Nue found in ancient chronicles are disturbingly specific, designed to evoke a visceral sense of biological wrongness. The face of the monkey suggests a cunning, human-like intelligence, a capacity for malice that goes far beyond the simple hunger of a wild animal. Eyewitnesses spoke of eyes that held a mocking glint, a gaze that seemed to judge and deride the humans it terrorized from the rooftops. The torso of the tanuki hints at a hidden internal complexity, perhaps acting as a massive resonance chamber for its devastating acoustic attacks. The limbs of the tiger represent a level of raw, physical violence that no human could hope to parry, with claws like blackened iron capable of shearing through armor. And finally, the serpent tail, an independent appendage, with its own head and venomous intent, creates a biological paradox, a creature with no blind spots and two separate nervous systems functioning as one. If we analyze this composite beast through the lens of modern science, we are forced to confront the possibility of interspecies fusion, a field of study that remains fraught with ethical peril even in our advanced era. Could the Nue have been a chimera in the literal scientific sense? Today we experiment with inserting human cells into animal embryos, but what if, thousands of years ago, a civilization existed that possessed a mastery of life manipulation, far beyond our current understanding? The Nue might not be a creature of myth, but a tragic byproduct of a forbidden science, a living weapon designed for a purpose that has long since been forgotten. The smoke that was said to always accompany its appearance might not have been magical at all, but a form of biological or technological cloaking, a way to disrupt the visual perception of its prey, through the release of specialized pheromones or particulate matter that refracted light. The most terrifying aspect of the Nue was undoubtedly its voice, a sound often compared to the cry of the white's thrush, yet described as infinitely more soul-crushing. In the Heian accounts, the Emperor Konoe fell into a wasting sickness, plagued by nightmares and a physical decline that no physician could cure. Every night, as the black clouds settled over the palace roof, the cry of the Nue would begin, and the emperor's condition would worsen. We now know that certain low-frequency sounds, particularly those around 19 hertz, can cause the human eye to vibrate, leading to hallucinations of gray figures in the periphery of vision. Furthermore, prolonged exposure to infrasound can lead to extreme anxiety and a total collapse of the nervous system. The Nue was not just killing its victims, it was vibrating their sanity into dust before it ever touched their flesh. The climax of the legend involves the legendary archer Minamoto no Yorimasa, but his hunt reveals numerous anomalies. Yorimasa did not fire his arrow at a visible target. He aimed into the center of a swirling mass of black smoke, To strike a lethal blow against an unseen enemy suggests that he may have had a way to track the creature that was not purely visual, perhaps sensing the subtle shifts in air pressure or the specific acoustic signature of the beast. When the arrow struck, the creature did not simply die. It let out a scream that was said to have been heard across the entire capital. A final, catastrophic release of energy. But the most suspicious part of the story follows the kill. The corpse was not kept or studied, but instead, it was stuffed into a hollowed-out log and cast into the Uji River to be carried away to the sea. This disposal suggests a massive state-level cover-up. If the Nue was a man-made horror, a product of a secret ritual or a failed experiment by the ruling elite, its physical remains would have been an intolerable liability. By casting the body into the river, they ensured that the evidence would rot and disappear, leaving only a heroic legend in its place. The sword Shishio, given to Yorimasa as a reward, might have been less of a trophy and more of a hush-money gift, to ensure he never spoke of what he truly saw inside that black smoke. The Uji River acted as the perfect grave for a truth that was too dangerous to be known. What kind of darkness must have been hidden in those chimeric cells to make the most powerful men in Japan tremble with the need to erase it from existence? The symbolic composition of the Nue also holds deep significance within the framework of Onmyodo and Feng Shui. The fusion of these specific animals represents a violent disruption of the natural balance, a deliberate act of chaos meant to fracture the spiritual protection of the capital. The Nue was a living curse, a biological manifestation of the demon gate. From a modern psychiatric perspective, the Nue can be seen as a projection of collective trauma. The Heian period was rife with political intrigue and hidden violence, and the monster may have been the shape that the shared anxiety of the people took. Yet, the consistency of the anatomical details across different regions suggests a shared reality. A monster that stepped out of the collective unconscious and into the physical world. The legacy of the Nue did not end with Yorimasa's arrow. Throughout history, there have been recurring reports of similar chimera-like creatures appearing in the remote mountains of Japan. In Hyogo and Shizuoka, there are mounds and shrines dedicated to the spirit of the Nue, places where the ground is said to remain cold even in the height of summer. These are containment sites built to keep a lingering malice from seeping back into our world. If the Nue was a species rather than a single individual, then the genetic blueprint for this horror may still exist, dormant in the deep, unexplored corners of the wilderness. In recent years, hikers have occasionally captured blurry footage of animals that do not fit any known classification, creatures that move with an unnatural, multi-jointed gait and possess eyes that reflect light in a way that suggests a complex, multi-layered retina. As we move further into the 21st century, we are beginning to create our own versions of the Nue. Our advancements in artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, and robotics are allowing us to fuse disparate elements in ways that the ancients could only dream of. We are building machines that think like humans, but possess the strength of predators and the cold, unblinking persistence of an algorithm. We are editing the genetic code of living things, creating designer organisms that serve our whims but may possess unforeseen behaviors. We are, in essence, weaving the black smoke of a new era. The digital noise you hear in your headphones, the sudden glitch in a video feed, the inexplicable feeling of being watched through your webcam, these are the cries of the modern Nue. We are creating a world so complex that we can no longer control the monsters that arise from its shadows. The story of the Nue is a warning, a timeless echo that reminds us of the price of hubris. When we reach across the boundaries of the natural order to create something for our own convenience, we invite a chaos that cannot be easily banished. The Nue was a creature that existed in the spaces between categories, neither fully animal nor fully human, just as our new technologies are becoming the ghosts in our own machine. We must ask ourselves if we are prepared for the moment when the black smoke settles over our own rooftops. Will we have a hero to stand against the dark? Or have we become so dependent on the monsters we have created that we can no longer tell the hunter from the prey? For those who wish to continue this journey into the hidden corners of history and the unexplained mysteries of our world, exploring the intersection of ancient lore and modern science, I invite you to join our community. If you find value in these deep dives into the shadows of the human experience, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support allows us to keep the light burning against the encroaching gloom, ensuring that these stories and the truths they hide are never forgotten. Every like, comment, and subscription is a signal that there are still those who seek the truth beneath the legend. What do you believe the Nue truly was? A biological weapon? A visitor from another realm? Or a mirror reflecting our own internal darkness? Please share your theories and your own unexplained experiences in the comments below. Your insights might be the key to solving a mystery that has haunted us for 1,000 years. The presence of the Nue still lingers in the quiet moments of the night, a reminder that the world is far stranger and more dangerous than we care to admit. As long as there is darkness in the human heart, there will be monsters waiting in the shadows to give it form. History tells us that the Nue can be defeated, but it also shows us that it always returns, wearing a new face and speaking in a new voice. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, listen closely to the sounds outside your window. If you hear a high-pitched metallic whistle that seems to vibrate the very glass of the pane, do not look out. Some things are better left unseen, and some truths are too heavy for the human mind to carry. We have touched the edge of the abyss tonight, but the depths remain unexplored. Until we meet again in the next chapter of our journey into the unknown, stay vigilant and keep your eyes on the shadows. Thank you for walking this dark path with me. Sweet dreams and good night.
You are lost, little one. Join us.
In the deepest silence of midnight, in a desolate wilderness far from the reach of civilization, or perhaps on an ancient battlefield, where the air still feels thick with the echoes of violent struggle, you might find yourself walking alone. The world around you is swallowed by a darkness, so profound that the boundary between the earth and the sky begins to dissolve, leaving you suspended in a void of cold air and heavy stillness. As you move through the shadows, a sound begins to emerge from the void. It is not the rustle of the wind or the cry of a nocturnal bird, but a rhythmic, crystalline clattering, like the sound of hard, dry objects, striking one another with relentless precision. Gachi, gachi, gachi. The noise vibrates through the very marrow of your bones, a grating, unpleasant resonance that defies the natural order of the night. You turn, searching for the source, but the landscape is empty, save for the twisted silhouettes of dead trees and the jagged outlines of rocks. Yet the sound grows louder, transforming from a distant annoyance into a piercing, invasive cacophony that seems to echo inside your own skull. You look up, and there, rising above the horizon, like a monument to eternal despair, you see it. It is a presence far deeper and more terrifying than the darkness itself, a colossal skeletal figure that pierces the heavens. This is the Gashadokuro. This spectral entity is no mere ghost or fleeting apparition, born of a tired mind. It is a physical manifestation of an unfathomable weight of human suffering, a crystallization of the resentment and unfulfilled desires of thousands who perished without a name, without a home, and without a prayer. They were the soldiers who fell in the mud of a forgotten war, listening to the cheers of an enemy they could no longer see. They were the peasants who succumbed to the agonizing slow crawl of famine, their stomachs empty and their hearts filled with the bitter realization that the world had forgotten them. When these bodies are left to rot in the open air, unburied and unmourned, their flesh returns to the earth, but their bones retain a singular burning purpose, the lingering attachment to the world of the living, and a ferocious anger toward the society that abandoned them act like a spiritual magnet. Bone by bone, the remnants of the dead are drawn together in the dead of night, knitting themselves into a singular gargantuan, will that seeks only to share its agony with the living. This towering giant, standing 15 meters tall, or more, is a testament to the fact that when collective grief is left unaddressed, it does not simply vanish. It coalesces into a force that can shake the very foundations of reality. Tonight we shall descend into the abyss of this sorrowful monster, exploring its origins, its terrifying nature, and the grim fate that awaits those who cross its path. Do you ever find yourself wondering about the ground beneath your feet? Have you heard rumors that your neighborhood was once the site of a bloody skirmish? a forgotten execution ground, or a mass grave from a time of plague. If you have such stories or local legends that keep you awake at night, please share them in the comments below. The seeds of a Gashadokuro may be closer than you think, resting just beneath the thin veneer of our modern lives. The origins of the Gashadokuro are deeply intertwined with the turbulent history of the Heian period, specifically the legendary rebellion of Taira no Masakado, after Masakado was defeated and his head was displayed in the capital. As a warning to all rebels, his daughter, Princess Takayasha, was left behind in the ruins of his ambition. Consumed by a desire to avenge her father and restore the honor of her clan, she retreated to the ancient palace of Soma. There it is said she mastered the dark arts of sorcery, communing with vengeful spirits to summon a gargantuan skeleton to strike terror into the hearts of the imperial army. This image was immortalized by the ukiyo-e master Utagawa Kuniyoshi in his famous print, Takayasha, The Witch and the Skeleton Spectre. In this masterpiece, the giant skeleton is depicted tearing through the bamboo blinds of the palace, its massive phalanges gripping the wooden beams as it looms over the terrified warriors below. This visual representation cemented the Gashadokuro in the Japanese consciousness as a singular titanic entity, but the deeper folklore suggests its nature is far more complex and terrifying. In truth, the Gashadokuro is the ultimate expression of collective trauma. It is the sum of thousands of individual tragedies, an amalgamation of the nameless dead, who were denied the dignity of a final rest. During the Sengoku period, the age of warring states, battlefields were often littered with the remains of the defeated, left to be picked, clean by scavengers and bleached white by the sun. Similarly, during the great famines of the Edo period, the roadsides were lined with those who had collapsed from exhaustion and hunger, their final moments spent in a state of utter isolation. While their physical forms decayed, the energy of their resentment, their onryo, seeped into the very soil. From a scientific or psychological perspective, we might call this the weight of history or the lingering trauma of a society. However, in the realm of the supernatural, this energy is a literal building force. Each small bone, fueled by a spark of fury, seeks out its neighbors, interlocking and building upon one another until a massive skeletal frame is achieved. This is not a creature of biology, but a creature of pure emotion given physical form, a monument of bone that walks the earth when the sun retreats, and the world is reclaimed by the shadows. The true horror of this entity lies in the paradoxical nature of its movements. Despite its immense size, which should by all rights cause the earth to tremble and the trees to shatter, the Gashadokuro moves with a supernatural predatory silence. It glides through the mist and the midnight air, like a wandering cloud, invisible to the eyes until it is far too late to run. The only warning a victim receives is that peculiar, high-pitched ringing in the ears, accompanied by the dry clicking of teeth and joints. Some researchers of the occult suggest that this sound is actually a form of spiritual interference, a frequency emitted by the mass of negative energy that disrupts the human nervous system. When that gachi-gachi sound begins to echo in the center of your mind, it means the giant has already marked you. It means that the hundreds of thousands of individual bones that make up its body are vibrating in anticipation of a new soul to join their ranks. Once the Gashadokuro finds a solitary traveler, it reaches down with a hand the size of a small house, its fingers cold and hard as stone, wrap around the victim with a strength that defies escape. In those final moments, as you are hoisted high above the ground, you are forced to look into the vast, empty caverns of its eye sockets. Within those hollows, there is no light, only a swirling vortex of the memories of the dead. You see the faces of 1,000 starving children, the final gasps of dying soldiers, and the tearful eyes of mothers who could not protect their families. The Gashadokuro does not just kill, it consumes the life force of the living, as a desperate, futile attempt to reclaim the warmth it was denied. It bites off the heads of its victims to drink the fresh vitality contained within, or it crushes them in its massive grip, allowing the blood to flow over its ancient, porous bones. To the Gashadokuro, every living human is an affront, a reminder of the tomorrow they never had, the meals they never ate, and the love they were forced to leave behind. Their anger is not logical, it is elemental. It is the scream of the forgotten given a voice that can crush the living. If you ever find yourself walking late at night and notice a sudden, inexplicable silence, followed by a metallic clicking sound that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, what would you do? Would you run blindly into the dark? Or would you freeze in the hope that you haven't been seen? Have any of you ever felt a presence so large it seemed to swallow the horizon, or heard a sound that didn't belong to the world of the living? Please share your survival strategies or your closest encounters in the comments, so that we might all learn how to navigate the dangers of the night. Every single bone that constitutes the body of a Gashadokuro carries the distinct, indelible imprint of its former owner's final moments. If one were to examine a single rib or a fragment of a skull from this titan, they might find the psychic echo of a father who gave his last morsel of food to his child before fading away in the dark. They might feel the agonizing longing of a young conscript who died in a muddy trench, clutching a lucky charm from a sweetheart he would never see again. They might hear the silent sob of an elderly woman who passed away alone in a cold hut, her existence erased by the indifference of a passing era. These individual threads of despair are woven together into a tapestry of absolute nihilism. Because of this, the Gashadokuro possesses no singular personality, no capacity for reason or mercy. It is a hive mind of hatred, a storm of sorrow that knows only the impulse to destroy. It is a fascinating detail of the legend that the Gashadokuro is strictly a creature of the night. The light of the sun, the source of life and clarity, acts as a solvent for the dark energy that holds the skeleton together. When the first rays of dawn touch the horizon, the spiritual bond between the bones is severed, and the giant collapses into a harmless pile of ancient remains, hidden among the tall grass or beneath the forest floor. But as soon as the sun dips below the edge of the world and the veil between the realms grows thin, the call begins again. The bones twitch, they slide across the earth, and they find their places once more. This cycle of destruction and reconstruction is said to continue for as long as the underlying cause of their resentment remains unaddressed. As long as there are those who die unmourned, and as long as the living choose to forget the tragedies of the past, the Gashadokuro will continue its nightly vigil, a terrifying reminder that the past is never truly buried. In our modern age, many believe that the time of monsters and spirits has passed, replaced by the glow of streetlights and the constant connection of the digital world. But is the Gashadokuro truly a thing of the past? Beneath the layers of concrete and steel that define our cities, the bones of history still rest. During urban expansion projects, it is not uncommon for workers to uncover massive pits of human remains, the forgotten victims of forgotten conflicts. If these remains are disturbed without the proper rites, if they are simply moved aside to make way for a new shopping mall or office tower, who is to say that the resentment does not find a new way to manifest? There are modern urban legends of office workers staying late in skyscrapers, only to see a massive white face staring back at them from outside a window 40 stories up. There are stories of drivers on lonely highways who hear a clattering sound that drowns out their engines, followed by a sudden shadow that eclipses their headlights. Perhaps the Gashadokuro has adapted to our world, hiding in the vertical shadows of the city or the dark spaces of our tunnels. Furthermore, in a society where social isolation is on the rise and many pass away alone in small apartments, their bodies undiscovered for weeks or months, a new kind of collective sorrow is being generated. This modern loneliness, this quiet desperation of the overlooked, may be the fuel for a new kind of spectral entity. Instead of a creature of the battlefield, we might be facing a Gashadokuro of the concrete jungle, a ghost of the abandoned and the unheard. Some online forums have reported strange digital recordings from abandoned buildings where, instead of voices, there is only the sound of thousands of tiny clicks, like a keyboard being struck by 100 hands, or bones rattling against a floor. Could this be the way the dead now communicate their presence? Using the frequencies of our technology to remind us that they are still here, and they are still angry. Protecting oneself from a Gashadokuro is an almost impossible task. Traditional wisdom suggests that carrying powerful talismans blessed by a high priest or chanting sacred sutras like the heart sutra may provide a temporary shield of spiritual energy. However, against a force comprised of thousands of souls, a simple prayer may not be enough. The only true way to banish such a creature is to address the source of its pain. These spirits do not want just blood, they want to be acknowledged. They want the world to know they existed, that they suffered, and that their lives had meaning. There is an old tale of a monk who encountered a Gashadokuro and instead of fleeing in terror, sat down and began to recite the names of all those who had fallen in that region, offering a sincere prayer for each one. As he spoke, the giant skeleton began to weep, its massive frame trembling not with rage, but with a profound sense of relief. One by one, the bones detached and fell to the earth, finally finding the peace they had sought for centuries. But in our fast-paced material world, do we have the spiritual strength to face such an entity with compassion? If a 15-meter-tall skeleton stood before you, smelling of ancient dust and the metallic tang of old blood, would you be able to stand your ground and offer a prayer? Or would your mind break under the weight of its collective despair? We often think of monsters as something to be defeated, but the Gashadokuro is a monster that needs to be healed. It is a reflection of our own failure as a society to care for one another. What do you think is the most powerful protection against the darkness? Is it a physical object, a religious belief, or perhaps something internal, like the strength of one's own will? If you have a personal talisman or a phrase that gives you courage when things go bump in the night, please share it with us. We may all need it sooner than we think. Looking at the Gashadokuro through the lens of folklore and sociology, we see that it is a profound expression of social anxiety. In the Edo period, the constant threat of starvation and the arbitrary cruelty of the ruling class meant that life was fragile and often meaningless in the eyes of the powerful. The Gashadokuro represented a way for the common people to visualize the collective power of the oppressed. It sent a message that even if you are small and weak in life, in death, your anger can join with others to become something that even the greatest samurai or daimyo cannot ignore. It is a dark, ironic form of solidarity, a union of the broken. In this sense, the monster is a mirror of the society that created it, a physical manifestation of the hidden tensions and unvoiced grievances of an entire era. When we study these legends, we are not just looking at scary stories to tell in the dark. We are looking at the emotional history of a people. We are hearing the echoes of those who were silenced by time and circumstance. The Gashadokuro asks us to look at the parts of our history and our current world that we would rather ignore. It asks us to remember the victims of war, the casualties of economic collapse, and the forgotten souls in our own neighborhoods. The bone-clicking sound is not just a threat, it is a call to conscience. It is a reminder that the dead do not go away just because we stop looking at them. They remain in the soil, in the shadows, and in the very air we breathe, waiting for us to acknowledge the debt we owe to those who came before us. As we conclude our journey into the depths of the Gashadokuro legend, consider the weight of the stories you have heard tonight. We live in a world that prizes the new, the bright, and the fast, but the Gashadokuro is a creature of the old, the dark, and the slow. It is a reminder that some things cannot be rushed, and some wounds take centuries to heal. Tonight, if you find yourself in a quiet place, listen closely to the sounds around you. Is that truly just the settling of the house, or the wind in the eaves? If you hear a rhythmic clicking, if the air suddenly turns cold, and if you feel a gaze from a height that no human could reach, remember the stories of the nameless dead. Do not look out the window. Do not seek the source of the sound. Instead, offer a silent thought for those who have no one left to remember them. It might be the only thing that keeps the giant at bay. We hope you found this exploration of the Gashadokuro both terrifying and thought-provoking. This sorrowful monster, born from the battlefields and famines of the past, continues to haunt our imagination for a reason. Behind its monstrous form lies a profound human truth about the power of memory and the consequences of neglect. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the abyss of Japanese folklore, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. Your support allows us to continue bringing these legends to life and exploring the mysteries that linger in the shadows of our world. If you have your own encounters with the unexplained or requests for future monsters you would like us to cover, please leave a comment below. We value your insights and your stories, as they help us build a community that respects and remembers the mysteries of the past. Be careful in the darkness tonight, and always be aware of what might be looming just behind you. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.